Hey guys, I mentioned earlier in my Stihl BR600 backpack leaf blower video that I was going to go over the valve clearance, and so I've got the tools I mentioned earlier. I'm going to go ahead and set up the camera and show you how to set the valve clearance on a Stihl BR600. This should also work for the BR550. I don't know if it goes down to the 450, 500, I'm not sure, but because I have the BR600. I don't think it goes up to the 700, but I'm not sure. I think they're actually the same engine on the 700. So let me get the camera set up in the meantime. Just make sure you hit that subscribe button. Subscribe to the channel, I appreciate it. At the end of the video, please like the video, comment on the video, share the video if anybody needs to know how to set the valves on a Stihl backpack leaf blower. So let me get the camera set up and we'll take a look. So here we are taking a look at the top of the valves. We already took the valve cover off. The valve cover looks like that. That's the valve cover, and it sits just like this. And there is another Torx bit on the top, Torx screw. The Torx bit you need to take these out is a T27. I did make the mistake of saying T25, even though I have my T27. I have a T27 on the end of my screwdriver right now, and like I said before, I've got the replacement gasket, and I took off the old gasket. The old gasket actually had a spot, it seemed like it must have been leaking right here, that was kind of flared, and there was some, looks like some blow by going down, and that's why all this soot's built up right here. So the inside of this is nice and clean. I'll just clean this one more time, get any of this leftover filth out. Just use some carbon choke cleaner on that. But as I mentioned before, we've got our feeler gauge, and it's got the end of the feeler gauge itself is actually ground down so that it fits in between the slots in here. A feeler gauge that's this wide wouldn't fit, because this has two sides that are stamped down on either side, and you can't get that in there. So now we can get in. This side actually has a lot more movement. You can see in the video this is moving a lot, and this doesn't quite move as much, but they're both actually loose. Now, as I mentioned in the video before, we set top dead center by sticking a screwdriver down in the hole, and as we spin it around, we can spin the front around, and that the S lines up with the bottom of the magnet, and that's when you know that the piston is at top, and that's called top dead center. So we're at top dead center right now. Now this doesn't have a specific, a lot of these have like a Torx that you have to hold in the top, and then you undo the nut, and then you can turn the Torx, and then you lock the nut back down. This isn't like that. These are just, the nuts themselves are the lock nuts. So what we do is we take our feeler gauge. Now it says 10 on here, but in reality I took a dial caliper and just measured this just to make sure, because this came with the kit from Stihl. This is a Stihl brand kit, and this came with it to gap the valves on this. Sorry for kicking the camera here. And I already took a dial caliper to this, and it's 0.1 millimeter, and that's the correct gap to set this to. So what you do is you slide this in and then tighten down the nut on top while you're holding the gauge in, and you just want to tighten this as long as the gauge can still move. It's not too tight yet, and we just want to tighten this up until the gauge gets tight but doesn't actually stick. So we're almost there. I can feel a little bit of resistance, and now it's stuck. See, I can't pull it out anymore. So that's that soft spot right between being stuck. See, now it can look, I barely moved the wrench, but that's good now. It can slide in and out. If I go a little bit tighter, it's stuck and I can't pull it out. So that's what we're going to do. We're just going to loosen it until that's like that. Do the same for the other side. Like I said, this side's a lot more loose, so we'll have to crank down on this one a good bit more to get it to the point where it's going to be tight on the gauge, and I don't know exactly what would cause one side to get way off and the other side's not too bad. But alright, so I'm feeling a little bit of resistance, so I'm going to tighten it. Now it's stuck, loosen it, so it's just right about there. I can feel it. You can actually hear it probably in the video, and that's where I'm going to leave it. Alright, so now the valves have been adjusted, and now I can take my new gasket and set my new gasket in place. There's only one way this fits because this funky kind of corner right here, there's only one spot for that corner to fit. So I'm going to put this, and it kind of sits around these metal corners in the back. In the back here, there's actually raised metal corners, and that's what holds it, the same as that little metal corner that's right there. And there's a metal corner. There's metal corners around the outside, and that's what pushes this gasket to where it's supposed to sit. I'm just making sure it's not missing any of those. So looks good all the way around. Like I said, I'm going to take some carbon choke cleaner and clean out the cover, and once I get the cover, I'm going to figure out what that torque spec is, and I'm going to go ahead and put the new there's that little copper, I'm thinking it's copper, it could be brass, but that's that goes on the screw and sits up against the top here to seal the top of the valve cover itself. I've got the valve cover all cleaned up. So now we can put the valve cover back in place. Now you can see why there's those two indentions in the top there to where those nuts stick up high. I've got the new brass I've got the new brass. Why won't it focus? Got the new brass on here. There we go. So we're going to put that in here. That's where it came from. And I'm going to use my T27. Get this back in place where it goes. All right, hold on just a second. So I do actually have a torque wrench, and I'm using the foot-pounds, and I've set it to 3. So that's the spec for this. And 3 is not a lot. You could do it by hand, but I feel like you could easily outdo it. And I don't want to overdo the tightening on this. So I just felt it starting to get snug, and there's the click. So it's not very much pressure at all. I guess you could bend in the top of the valve cover. Oh, look, I blew a finger out and didn't even notice. You could bend the top of the valve cover, perhaps. So that's set now, and I've got the. Oops, there's my bit. I've got the spark plug here, and it's all cleaned up. The spark plug gap was actually too wide, so I reset the gap on there. And these are typically, it's not exactly hand tight, but you go like hand tight and then another quarter turn. So I've got that down all the way, and then just doing like that. So we've got the spark plug set now. We've got the valve cover with the new gasket and the valve set and the screw in. Got the new primer bulb on. We got the new air filter in. So I'm going to finish putting this all back together. And once this is all back together, I'll be able to get it fired up and see how she runs.